What up, roomies? Imagine being in something for 20 years, thinking it's faith, thinking it's family, thinking it's truth, only to wake up one day and realize you were in a cult the entire time. Tonight's guest didn't only study cults, he lived it. And this story about manipulation, belief, control, and what it really takes to break free is what we're going to be discussing today. Welcome to Neighbors, Peter Young. Peter, what's going on, man?
Ariel, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I
Glad to be on
really,
here.
I really appreciate you being on, man. And it's crazy because when I stumbled across your post about your book, tall man, damn,
Stop this tall man, save the tiger.
yeah, stop the tall man, save the tiger. Crazy title, I love it. Um, and like when I stumbled across the post, I was like, yo, this is crazy, and like it's wild how when you start a journey of like actually speaking to people about their experiences in real life, you come across people who have lived things that we only see in the news or in like fiction and all that stuff. So the floor is yours. And I really wanted to say before we get into anything, how does one even end up in a cult without really realizing it?
Well, great question. So I always tell people that cults come in all different shapes and sizes,
Yeah.
and they can all look differently from the outside. But at their core, they all share two things. Number one is a leader who doesn't like to share authority, doesn't like to be questioned, makes all the rules. So you got a leader, and then you have undue manipulative mind control. That's where they start. So in other words, if you're in the cult, you have no idea. You never know you are in a cult. You only know you were in one. Because to me, the definition of a cult is at its foundation that undue manipulative mind control, or call it brainwashing, if you will.
Mhm.
So the people who join it think they're joining something else, something better. They never join a cult knowingly. No one's in a cult. That's always somebody else, not us. We're better. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense because it's like you're trying to gravitate towards a community that basically shares your beliefs, and you're trying to become. I would say for 99% of the people there, except for the hierarchy of it, is trying to become a better person and live a better life. Am I correct on that so far?
I would say so. I think everybody has this innate desire to belong, to be part of a group, to be part of something special. And
Yeah,
that's oftentimes what cults will offer on the front door, on the way in. Join our self-actualization or self-improvement club, whatever you want to call it. And I would imagine there are probably some times with cults that they start out that way, and then let's say the leader maybe gets corrupted, it gets to his head, his ego gets inflated, and then it takes a turn for the worse. Or maybe it started out that way. I'm not sure. But clearly on the way in, people do think it's something else. And again, everybody wants to feel like they are part of something special. Just take a look at how many of us in America root for the Red Sox or the Yankees, Duke, North Carolina, Celtics, Lakers, right? They're
yeah.
our team. You're not out there playing, but you still identify with your group, your tribe. And everybody wants that.
No, you're absolutely right on that. So, take us back in time. How did everything happen for you? Like, how did when did this all start, and like, how did you realize that you were in a cult at that time?
Yeah, well, I didn't realize it until, many years later, probably 21, 22 years later. So I unwittingly joined the tiny but destructive religious cult when I married the love of my life. So this would have been about 29 years ago. And
Hmm.
I call her Paige in my memoir, Stop the Tall Man, Save the Tiger. Met her at a singles Bible study. And I had known of her. I was out in little old Pocatello, Idaho. Look it up on a map. Tiny little place in southeast Idaho. And I was working for the local ABC affiliate. I was a sports broadcaster. So I was on the
Yeah.
6 and 10 news. And we met at the singles Bible study, and you couldn't miss her. I mean, she was tall, 6'1", blonde, beautiful woman. So I'd seen her around town, knew of her. And then when I met her, very shortly thereafter, I kind of heard all about this Uncle Robert character.
Yeah.
Now, Uncle Robert was the mysterious spiritual guru that Paige and her family, adored and revered. So she grew up in this. She knows no other world. And so when I started dating her and I heard about this Uncle Robert, it was really weird. And so I knew if we got married that he would be a big part of my life because he was clearly a big part of her life.
Yeah.
And it rubbed me the wrong way. But I was in love, so I was kind of blinded by love. Really wanted to marry this woman. Finally met this Uncle Robert character at Paige's brother's wedding, and I
Yeah.
thought he was weird, a little eccentric and odd, but largely harmless. So we got engaged, like 2 weeks later, then got married a couple months after that. Fast forward, we had 5 kids over about 20 years of marriage. And for the first few years of our marriage, I thought I was the best husband ever. She was the best wife ever. We had this great marriage. And Robert, I call him Booty now because he doesn't
Yeah.
have authority over me. So I try not to call him Uncle Robert. And he wasn't related to any of us, by the way. I'm 6'5", Northern European looks.
Yeah.
My former wife was blonde hair, blue eyes. Her whole family, Northern European stock.
Yeah.
And Robert Booty was, this short, fat, bald guy with olive complexion from Syria who came to America and married a fairly normal American wife. But he met my future in-laws at a tiny seminary in California a few years before Paige was even born. Okay, so Paige grows up in this very dysfunctional home, and Booty lived in Southern California. When I met Paige, I'm in Idaho. Then we get married. We live in Idaho and Montana. So he's never right there with us. So when a lot of people think about a cult, they think about living in a compound.
Yeah.
David Koresh and Waco, right? Those guys. That wasn't us. We didn't look like a cult at all. That's why I
Okay.
say at their core, cults all have this undue manipulative mind control. So some cults have physical abuse, sexual abuse, that ends up in a
Yeah.
fiery suicide or raid and confrontation with the federal government. That was not us. But all of those cases, David Koresh and Waco, Heaven's Gate, Jim Jones, and drinking the Kool-Aid, they all started with a leader brainwashing the followers. So, Robert Booty exerted all this control over my wife, which then became, control over me because
Yeah.
Ariel, the best way to describe it was I was the frog in the pot of boiling water. You go in the water when it's cold, then by the time it's boiling, it's too late.
Yeah,
And
I
that
got
was
that.
me. I went along to get along because my wife revered the guy. For many years, I thought the guy was nuts. But
So
eventually,
you
he just
so you
brainwashed me
already
and
had
destroyed my family. Say it
no, so
again.
you already had the red flags on this Uncle Robert character, but
I
as the first couple of years of the marriage.
I had the red flags before I even met the guy because I remember telling Paige, I said, it's not so much about him, it's about how you and your family talk about him. Like it was really weird the way they would talk about him.
I got you. So when you brought up how, all right, when you brought up the subject of it with like Paige, was it like a constant argument about it, or was it more like she would just brush you off? Like, how did those conversations go? Because
Yeah, excellent
you're
question.
you're an outsider looking in, so it's like you're like, hold on, something's not connecting here. You know what I mean?
And we rarely had these conversations, and that was really my fault as the husband and the leader of the home. I did not stand up to her. I was afraid. I wasn't afraid I would lose my marriage early on, but I could see how much she adored him, how much control he had over her and my in-laws, and he hated questions. Any kind of a question was like an affront to him. How dare you? You need to just believe me. He demanded blind loyalty. And there was really only one time about 3 years into our marriage. It was shortly after 9/11. And he talked about how, at 9/11, 80,000 people died. It was all the Jews' fault. It was my first time really getting insight into his, raving hatred for Jews and how they control the world. So he thought. And I remember thinking like, wow, this is really dark. This is really,
Yeah.
he's not who he says he is to Paige. And she listened politely, but, we never followed up. I never followed up with it. And we never kicked him out of our lives. And at a point, it just becomes too late. And so I should have very early on been like, wait a minute, timeout. We need to get rid of this guy. And I just waited too long, didn't bring it up enough.
Okay. So as you were saying, right? This Uncle Robert character comes into your lives. You met him met him at your brother-in-law's wedding, and it continued on. So like, as you in your marriage, right? What kind of what kind of authority did he have over like Paige, and how did that kind of like, you know, shift the relationship around?
Yeah, we would meet with him. We'd call them these conferences. So we would meet up in northern Idaho at Paige's parents' house, once or twice a year, and we would listen to him with his theology and his ideology, and again, she believed all of it. So it would play out in the day to day with, let's say, the disciplining and structure of our children. Um, and then it would go into all kinds of things, like if there was any kind of really question that Paige would have on anything in life. I'm talking sexual intimacy. I'm talking about diet, politics, you name it. She would go to him first before she would talk to me about it. And then whenever Uncle Robert said something, it was unassailable. You just had to believe it hook, line, and sinker. Let me give you a funny story. And if I think you probably read this in my book.
Yeah.
The first time I met my future in-laws, I had driven up to their house, like a 6-hour drive. So I'm there 10, 15 minutes, and I had to go use the bathroom. I go down the hall, I go to the bathroom, I stand up to pee because I'm a guy. And when I come out, my future father-in-law, I didn't know at the time, but my future father-in-law is standing right there in the doorway. And he says, I heard you go to the bathroom, which is a little weird.
All right.
And he says, in our household, the men need to sit to pee. And he said, it's clean, it prevents splashing, et cetera, et cetera. And then he said, Uncle Robert taught me that. And whenever Uncle Robert taught you something, you could not question it. You had to just go with it. And so when I say Uncle Robert was the expert on everything, Ariel, he was the expert on how men had to pee and everything in between.
That's crazy, because I know that that practice is done a lot in like jail too. Like you have to like sit down to pee.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
And I think it's a form of control, really, is what it is.
Definitely is, because it's like you're telling, a man who's usually used to peeing standing up that, you have to sit down now. It's like, excuse me, like this is how I've always done it. So it's like, what's going on with you? Like what's up,
Yeah. And there are many other ways where it would play out. But I mean, again, just if you're out there and you're listening and you're married, just think about all the important conversations you have with your spouse about everything, right? Like when you're living together, it's finances, it's your physical intimacy, it's your emotional intimacy. Where are you going to church? What do you believe in? How are you going to raise your kids? How are you going to pay for rent? Whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And imagine now that your spouse, with all of these questions, really is leaning on another person who's not, let's say, your father-in-law. I mean, I could kind of understand that, but it's not your father-in-law. It's another man that, your wife looks to first before they look to you. And that eventually wears on you. And it was very difficult for a long time.
No, I get that. And like, what kind of rules and regulations would like this Uncle Robert character set for, like, let's say, your finances and raising the children?
Well, he would never really come out and overtly say, you need to do this, but it was close. So, for instance, with our finances, in the Christian faith, there's tithing. You're supposed to give 10% back to the Lord, to your church, whatever it is, as a way of saying thank you. Thank you, Lord, for blessing me, because you own everything. So after a while, it became clear that all of our tithe money had to go to Uncle Robert. And my father-in-law was the first one who said that. Then, of course, Paige wanted all of our tithe money to go to him. And he wasn't getting rich off of us, but we would send him tithe money. Now, our cult was very small, by the way, I should point out.
Yeah.
So my in-laws, they would send him tithe money. We sent him tithe money. My brother-in-law, he was in the cult. And so there's only like a few families, 12 to 15 adults tops. And so he wasn't getting rich off of us, but it was understood. And oh, by the way, like when I did finally question it, maybe 17, 18 years into our marriage, my wife was furious with me. It was insulting that I would think about tithing to somebody else. How dare you? And oh, by the way, he loved to go to casinos. Robert taught us all that casinos were the true churches in America. And he called casinos his office. And he felt like anybody could go to a casino and be blessed by the Lord. And I'm like, okay, I guess technically that's the case, but I don't go to casinos much. But when I do go, I see people worshiping money, not the Lord.
That's
so
a fact.
We tithed him every month. We sent him money, Ariel, and then he would go to casinos all the time. And I remember a friend of mine, after I kind of got out of it, because I was brainwashed for about 2.5 years. I know it sounds like I was very resistant, and I was for a long time. Near the end of my marriage, I was brainwashed. So when I got out of it, I remember talking to a friend of mine from college and explaining to her what had happened. And she said, wait a minute, Peter, you guys sent him money every month and he went to the casinos all the time? And I said, yeah, when you put it like that, it doesn't sound good, does it?
Not at all. But that's the craziest thing ever, is because it's like, I don't know. All right, and maybe this is something that, a person that hasn't gone through your experience is questions like especially, and I understand, like, love is a powerful emotion and you go with it for a while. So
Yeah.
like, why 20 years? Like, you had the red flags, you had the, you kind of already knew that this guy was a quack, and why didn't you, like, and I understand love is like really, really a strong emotion, but like, you already knew like what was going on. So like, what compelled you to kind of like try to keep it together?
Sure. I would say there's probably two answers to that question. The first one would be, God hates divorce. So do I. I never wanted a divorce. My parents are 89 and 91, and they're still alive. They've been married almost 70 years.
Yeah,
And that's what
that's a
I
big.
wanted, right? I wanted to grow old with this woman. We'd have children and grandchildren and never leave. And divorce is horrible. Oh my gosh. I mean, what I went through is bad, but divorce is bad. And I'm an internal optimist. Glass is always half full, not half empty. I just always thought it would get better. And I truly loved her. And I know I make it sound at times it was bad, but for the first 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, whatever, his control was not that bad. And again, I was probably blinded to a lot of it. But then the second part of that answer would be, after 15, 16 years into the marriage, I then started to turn around myself and thought, well, maybe I had a bad attitude. Maybe I wasn't cutting Uncle Robert enough slack. And I became brainwashed. So the last, let's say, 2.5, 3 years of our marriage, I thought, wow, now I've finally seen the light. Gee, I was wrong all these years. I'm sorry, it was my fault. When of course it wasn't. But that's probably the two-part answer to your question.
I get that, and like, because you're the brainwashing happened during the last bit of the relationship, right? So, at your deepest point, what did you fully believe in Uncle Robert? Like, you were like, all right, cool, let's go, Uncle Robert, or like, what, what was the like final straw that made you just give in?
Well, let's see. I would say I clearly would look back and I can reread emails and letters I wrote to him and to Paige and think, wow, that's crazy. I was brainwashed.
Yeah.
But here's the interesting thing. I was never, not one time, truly relaxed and comfortable around Robert, either on the phone or writing him an email or in person. I never knew what was going to come out of his mouth next. And so often it was a very, kind of bitter rebuke towards me. Peter, no, you're wrong, you idiot, do this instead. And I just never knew what was going to come up next. And so for years, as I'm trying to like this guy, as I'm trying to get along with this guy, I'm trying to overlook all the crazy stuff he said. Well, now, even though I am brainwashed and I'm 100% in, I'm still never comfortable. I never was, even though I was brainwashed. So I would have believed in everything that he taught, but it was still hard. It was still uncomfortable to be around him. And so, really, let's say if you want to use the phrase, the straw that broke the camel's back, it was on the way out. So on the way in was very slow and gradual. On the way out, a lot of people trying to escape a cult. I got kicked out, basically, when my wife left me. So she left me to draw closer to Uncle Robert because I was never pure enough. I asked too many questions. She and Uncle Robert then taught the children that I was the devil, that I was not a Christian, that I was not saved, that I was Satan, that I was a sorcerer, a bloodline, or a sperm donor. And when they finally started to tell the children, we had 5 kids, that's when I knew. I said, wait a minute, this is wrong. This is evil.
That's crazy. And how did the children react to like their mother kind of like showing them Uncle Robert's like teachings and all that?
Well, they grew up around it. So, kids are very adaptable, right? And kids will look up to, the authority figures in their lives, right? If you grow up in Saudi Arabia, probably going to grow up a Mormon, right? I'm sorry, a Muslim. If you grow up in Salt Lake City, you'll grow up a Mormon, right? So, and, you grow up with Jewish parents, you're probably going to grow up to be Jewish. I mean, that's just the way it is. Kids, they're going to, most of the time, absorb what's given to them. So they just saw Uncle Robert, as, I don't know if they saw him as one of the family because he didn't look like us, but he was
Yeah.
always there. And with the way that their mother and I and their grandparents reacted to him and referred to him, they immediately knew, uh-oh, we better revere this guy as well, or we'll get in trouble. And that was kind of the message they got, because now as they're a little bit older, so when their mother left and started to call me the devil, and in front of the kids, the youngest would have been about 6, and then the oldest would have been about 18 or 19. So now they see Uncle Robert, their grandparents, and this is on Paige's side, not my side. So my parents, my brothers and sister-in-laws, they had no idea this was going on. They weren't a part of this at all. They had no clue. Yeah, this is all from Paige's family. So the kids will see that, here's dad getting crushed by their mother and crushed by their grandparents and Uncle Robert. And the message is very clear. I don't want that. I better stay in line, right? And not dare question Robert.
Damn. Wow.
And I could see the raised eyebrows on your face when I told you this about. So my family, again, during this time, we're living in Idaho and Montana. My family's on the East Coast and the West Coast. Robert would have spoken at our wedding in 1997. But other than that, that's the last and only time, my parents, my 4 older brothers, my sister-in-laws, my true aunt and uncles would have ever met the guy. It was one time at my wedding. And over the years, they kind of would have heard a few stories about this uncle, what's his face. But other than that, they had no clue. So when I finally come out of this, I finally tell them, listen, my wife left me. She took the 3 younger kids with her. And, they're calling me the devil and a sperm donor. And, Uncle Robert's teaching about casinos are the true churches in America. They had no clue this was going on.
But Peter, quick question. You mentioned you have 4 older brothers, right?
Yeah.
So you're the youngest of 5, I'm presuming, or do you have younger siblings than that?
No, I'm the youngest of 5.
Youngest of 5. How didn't none of your brothers know? Like, you didn't talk to them about it when you were stressed out? Like, there wasn't any what was the emotion that you kept inside that kept you from talking to one of your brothers about it? Because I would presume that as you're going through this tough time, you would reach out to somebody that's close to you.
Great question. And so that kind of really leads to an important point. Cult leaders control their members through isolation, paranoia, and secrecy, and also guilt and shame and other things. But I think those 3 are the biggest ones: isolation, paranoia, and secrecy. So paranoia, only Uncle Robert knew what was truly going on in the world, and thus his life was in danger. So were ours. So we had to protect him. And then the isolation and the secrecy was, well, don't throw your pearls before the swine. You've probably heard that phrase before. Uncle Robert's brilliant, and Peter, your brothers and your parents, they wouldn't understand. They wouldn't get it. So they're a threat. Don't tell them anything. So I didn't share anything with them. And so that's how I was controlled. We circled the wagons around Uncle Robert. Now, I knew in the back of my mind, one of the reasons I wasn't sharing a lot of this with my brothers and parents was because it was nuts. And they, of course, would see it was nuts. But what I was most worried about, again, Ariel, was losing my relationship with my wife and my kids. Because here's another important point. Paige was one of 5 children as well. So I'm one of 5, and so is she. But on her side of the family, so that's the Clausen family, you either were with Uncle Robert or you were the enemy. And so she had 3 siblings that didn't want anything to do with them. Well, they were shunned and vilified. I mean, viciously. We had nothing to do with them. And so I didn't want that with my family. So instead of telling my family everything and having a confrontation, because I knew they would say, Peter, this guy's nuts, I didn't tell them anything. That way I preserved my relationship with my family. I kind of kept them at a distance, but I wanted to make sure none of my family, my brothers, my parents, would get that same treatment, if that makes sense.
No, I got what you mean. It's better to keep them in the dark so there's a sense of peace versus bring them into the fold where, your ex-wife's family wouldn't, not come after them, but vilify them. So
kind of, it would create a showdown. And then Uncle Robert, well, Peter, your brother or your sister or your parents said this, you need to shun them. You need, literally, why have anything to do with them? And I'd be like, well, because it's my brother, and so I didn't want that moment, and I knew it would happen unless I kind of kept them at an arm's length distance.
I got you. And when you finally like left everything, and you're going through the breakup, and you actually open up to your family about it, what did they say? Did they like offer you like bro, like I would have been there for you? What was their reaction when when you initially came out and told them everything?
Well, they were very loving, very kind. They couldn't have been more supportive. Let me just give you a little bit of a backdrop.
Yeah,
So, again, they had no idea what was going on. Um, we'd been married almost 20 years. She left January 2017. And so no one in our local community knew, again, it was all secretive. So I didn't tell anybody that she had left. She
yeah,
took our three youngest kids with her to northern Idaho to live with her parents now. So she's moved out. And she told me not to tell anybody. Robert told me not to tell anybody because, they're just not going to understand. Well, duh. Yeah. Because what you're
yeah,
doing is evil. So I didn't tell anybody. So I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I'd lost 30 pounds. I was a wreck. I was never suicidal,
yeah.
but I was done with life. I couldn't handle it. I was losing my
You,
marriage. My kids are being taught on the devil. Nobody knew what was going on. Now, if you go through something hard, like you want someone there to talk to. I had nobody other than Uncle Robert. Like Paige was like, well, you just need to talk to Uncle Robert. Well, he's the guy that's causing the problems in the first
yeah,
place. I'm still brainwashed at this time, so I didn't know it. So when Paige and Uncle Robert started to then teach the kids, this is about 3 months after she left,
yeah,
that you're not a true father, Peter. You're so much less than that. You're just a sperm donor to bloodline. Just give it up. And they did this so that the kids would look to Uncle Robert as their true father, not me. Because at the time, my in-laws called Uncle Robert Dad. They called him Dad. And my kids would call him either Uncle Robert or Grandpa Bob. And that's another trait of a cult leader. They try and blur the lines of the nuclear family or destroy it so that everybody, you and me, and let's say, if we had kids or we had our parents were still alive, everybody would be like a child to Uncle Robert. He'd be the dad of everybody. And that was the goal. And so when I finally had a bit of a realization, like, wow, my three kids are gone. The two oldest boys were like high school and college age. So
yeah.
um, she didn't take them with her. They still live with me, but they didn't talk to me at the time.
I
And
was I
like,
was just about to ask about like the two older ones, like if like after that, like if the relationship was kind of rock solid, were they like there to kind of like support you, and were you there to support them?
exact
You know?
opposite. They totally believed Robert. They totally believed their mother. And I had a child, look me in the eye once and say, "You're a devil with no soul." And so I try and hide their identities so that's the
Yeah,
bit of
yeah, of course.
privacy for them. And I changed everybody's name in my memoir, "Stop the Tall Man, Save the Tiger." But to give you an idea of how bad it was, I'm going to go back about 2 years. So we had 5 kids.
Yeah,
And about 2 years before Paige left me, she wanted to be a surrogate and provide Uncle Robert with a male grandson. So Robert had two sons who had granddaughters. He had no grandsons. And so for Paige, it was unthinkable that Uncle Robert's bloodline did not continue and save the world, whatever. So she wanted to be a surrogate and provide him with a male grandson by getting impregnated by one of Robert's sons. Well, I was repulsed by this idea. I'm like, no, it was awful. Which, of course, Uncle Robert thought it was a great idea. Paige thought it was a great idea. And then when I was resistant to it, of course, she got even more angry with me. Okay, now 2 years later, she's left me. And now
yeah,
she's just calling me a bloodline and a sperm donor. And I'm like, wait a minute. 2 years ago, you thought Robert blood and sperm was so precious we needed to, save it. Now you're using it to denigrate me and put me down. That was kind of the first moment where I really started to come out of it.
hmm. And wow, this is deep. This is true. Rumi's. I'm almost at a loss for words because it's like I can't fathom somebody going through all this without like snapping or like to be honest, and this is probably because I grew up a little rougher, punching Uncle Robert in his face. You know what I mean? One time, I would have been like, "Yo, listen, bow. You need to like chill out. This is my family." You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
yet again, I also see how deep rooted he was in Paige's Paige's family and how they were already taken over, and how that faith and belief continues on.
right.
And P, I'm gonna be honest with you, bro. Like reading it is one thing, but when somebody tells it to you, it hits differently. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
It,
So
it I was in such a tough spot. And like
yeah,
if people are just listening to this and not looking at our faces, I was laughing when you said that. But the thought of
Yeah,
punching was it never occurred to me or anything like that because I'm not really a violent guy. But
yeah,
if I did anything like that, or even just insulted Uncle Robert or asked a question inappropriately, then I was diminished in the eyes of my wife. And then I was, on the outs with her. And that, of course, was my vulnerability, which is another important point. Cult leaders prey on the vulnerable.
yeah.
Well, I'm a college graduate. I'm 6'5". I'm healthy. I, I'm not a very vulnerable person. My vulnerability, though, was I tried to protect my marriage.
Mm.
And so that's how I was controlled, really.
And that's crazy because like it's taking something so precious that like a marriage, a family, when you start those things, that's very precious, especially to like a
Yep.
husband and a husband and a father.
Yep.
I haven't had the blessing as of yet, but I'm working towards it,
Good for
right?
you.
But I would assume that something of that nature you always want to protect. You always want to make sure that your wife is good, the kids are good, and
Yep.
it's crazy when you're trying to put your best foot forward and things that are kind of like outside of your control, outside of your domain, I would say, is influencing things not to go the way that I wouldn't want to say the way you wanted to go, but the way that natural progression would be in that situation if that exterior influence wasn't there.
Yeah. And really, at this point now, and I never wanted the divorce. I really tried very hard to save the marriage, but she was convinced that I was the devil and a fraud and
Yeah,
an alien and all this. And really, despite all the horrible things she has said and done, Paige is a victim as well.
yeah,
She's grew up in this world where this man has, brainwashed her. So, the marriage ended. She filed for divorce. We fought over the years because of the kids. So we got a guardian ad litem involved, and so that's where the courts appoint someone to look after the best interests of the kids in a high conflict divorce,
yeah.
and which ours was. So she wrote a jaw dropping 50-page report. She saw the cult influence, which the courts acknowledges abusive to kids. And again, thankfully in our case, no sexual or physical abuse. And then
Thank
she
God.
saw parental alienation. And that's where one parent tries to alienate the kids from the other, right? Well,
Yeah,
telling the kids your dad's the devil is pretty bad. And so the
super bad.
guardian ad litem, the counselor, my attorney said, was the worst case of parental alienation they'd ever seen. So the three youngest kids were sent back to me, and they lived with me the two youngest ones are still with me. So we fought it out in the courts for a long time. And, cults and divorce are really hard on kids. And so my relationship with my five kids is kind of a mixed bag. The youngest two that are with me we have a good relationship. They still love their mother as they
Yeah,
should.
of course.
At this point, they clearly see, the wickedness that was done by Booty. And then with the three older kids, it's a work in progress. Is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah. At least it's a work in progress and not just a complete shutout. You know what I mean? And that's the best
Yeah.
we could hope for right now, especially the fact that um that kind of brainwashing and that kind of influence does take time and effort to kind of reverse and for people kind of take the rose colored glasses off, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And as they get older and as they become, wives and husbands and mothers and fathers, my hope is that they will be able to, with distance and time, be able to see, well, wait a minute, I need to cut some dad some slack. He wasn't the devil. He wasn't Satan. He tried to save, the marriage with my mother and just didn't happen. And hopefully we will have a healthy relationship. And really, I think I learned something the other day too, Ariel, is that, for me, the most important thing is, as I'm a Christian man,
Yeah,
I'm a follower of Christ, and I want my children to also do the same. And so, whether or not my kids really like me, like, hey, we're buddies, the most important point is that I am a man and I'm a father, and I fulfill that role, and I try and lead the kids and point the children towards having a relationship with Christ. Because there are times where, when you're the dad, you have to be the dad. Whether the kids like you or not, that doesn't matter. That's secondary. Obviously, every dad wants their
yeah.
kids to like them, but first and foremost, you have to fulfill that role of being the father. And right now, it's kind of a tricky role for me.
No, I get that, bro. Like, and I could see it in your face how hard this really is on your soul, you know what I mean? And you're doing the best you can, and I give
Yeah,
you your kudos and I give you your grace because This isn't a situation that you could easily get an article about. It's not like it's a simple. All right, mom and dad had a idea of differences, and we
Right.
decided that it would be better that we're not together. You know what I mean? This is something totally left field, I would say, and not to put the story down or anything like that, but it's like this is a rarity, and for a child's psychology, it's crazy because there's so much. They're being pulled in so many different directions that they really don't know what to believe or what not to believe at the time, depending on their age and how deep in it they were.
It's like I love going on YouTube and watching videos about diet and nutrition and what
Yeah,
exercises to do. How can I do better in my dips or pull-ups, whatever. And I'm watching 10 to 15-minute videos on YouTube all the time. I've never come across a 10 to 15-minute YouTube video on what to do when you're in my situation, right?
never.
But that's partly why I wrote my book, is to use my story as a cautionary tale. Small cults are out there. They're real. They can easily hide within society. Errol, I was a sports broadcaster.
True.
I was on ESPN. I was on CBS. I was on OLN. I was on all kinds of networks, traveled around the country. And yet, slowly but surely, during that entire time, I'm getting sucked into a tiny little religious cult. And no one had any idea. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, is so that people can really be aware of the red flags and know that these things exist. And trust me, you do not want to experience my journey in and out of a cult. It's not fun.
100%, and I get that. So just moving away from like the actual story itself and like your experiences, and what kind of like from your experience, what kind of like psychological tricks did Uncle Robert use kind of to like get your in-laws under his thumb? Because I would suspect as older people they would have been more wiser.
Well, he would have met them when they were very young. They probably met
Okay.
in their mid-20s, let's say. So right now, Robert and my in-laws would be in their early 80s, but they met
Yeah.
at that seminary in Fresno, California, late 60s, early 70s. So they would have met when they were around the same age, probably mid to late 20s. And and Robert would have been very cunning, strong knowledge of psychology, tons of confidence, very narcissistic, very charismatic, which again, these are all common traits of cult leaders.
True.
And another thing too for your audience is to understand is that cult leaders don't start out spouting utter nonsense, right? They don't start spouting out lies and craziness. No one would follow them. They start with the truth, and then they share the truth. And again, I don't say that facetiously. Most cult leaders
Yeah.
probably start out sharing the truth, and then they twist it and pervert it over time to that 5, 10, 15 years down the road. It's not the truth, but they start out sounding really good, and that's how you get people sucked in. You can get sucked into a cult in a million different ways. Again, for me, it would have never happened if it wasn't for my wife. I
True.
got sucked in because I was trying to protect my marriage.
No, and you're a brave person for that, because a lot of people would have seen those flags and be like, you know what, we gotta cut ties on this one, especially if their partner isn't trying to like be receptive of it. So I do give you your grace and your flowers for that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're a good person for just sticking around trying to like make it work, because that right there is a heavy, heavy burden.
Yeah, and I've been able to come to grips with it. Like, my
Yeah,
book is, I think you read some of it. It's pretty heavy. It's pretty
yeah,
intense. But in the end, it's victorious, right? Like what I went through was really bad.
yeah.
But it doesn't bother me to talk about it. It's not painful anymore. There's a verse in the Bible, Romans 8:28. All things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. Okay, so even bad situations can be used for good if we allow it. So I went through a bad situation. Well, hopefully it's being used for good now so that I can warn other people. Which,
True.
if I can real quick get into, because I don't know how much time we have, but if it's
No, we got time. Don't worry about it.
the red flags of like someone joining a cult. Remember, nobody knows they're joining a cult. Nobody knows they're in a cult
True.
because the undue mind control is working on them. So you, as the friend or family member, are the one that sees it. So if somebody cuts off their historic communications, so they don't show up to Bible study anymore, they don't show up to Friday night beers, poker night bowling, whatever it is,
Mhm.
and now they have this new person in their life, and it's all or nothing, all praise, and you can't ask any questions, and you can't, put this person down. And now they all of a sudden, they don't email, they don't call, they don't show up anymore. Those are huge red flags. I'm
True.
not saying that person, your friend or loved one, is in a cult. I'm saying, wait a minute, ask questions, right? Have
True.
those difficult conversations. And they probably won't start it because, again, they think they're joining something great. But if you see it, you got to step out and initiate and have those, they might be, awkward conversations.
I got you on that. And when you finally got out of it, right? How did you start rebuilding your identity again? Like after, separating from your ex-wife, only having the two oldest, like how did like you started reconstructing yourself?
Great question. And really, my identity is in Christ. I am a Christian, follower of Christ. That's what a Christian means. And I always had that. I never lost my faith. For a time, I thought I did. That's another thing cult leaders do. They act as a gatekeeper to God. So, of course, Robert, was convinced I was a fraud and a liar, not a Christian. And for a time, he convinced me. But then I realized that no, that was awful. That was wicked and unbiblical. So the Lord really, let's say, removed the blindfold off of my
Yeah,
eyes, and I could see. And yeah, I was no longer a husband, and I really cherished that role, but I'm still a Christian and I'm a believer. The Lord rescued me. So that's always been my identity. Now it's just more clear. And I'm still a father. And whether or not if my children, respect me and love me or not, I'm still a father. And I'll always have that. So I think in a way, Ariel, what I went through is kind of like a crucible where you
yeah,
pour the metal in, you pour the gold and silver in, and then when you heat it up, all the impurities come out. It's kind of like what happened with me. Like now I'm really crystal clear, and this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and this is what I believe in.
I got you on that. And did you kind of like reconnect with your family, not like her family, but your side of the family? Did like spend more time with your brothers and your parents?
It's not so much that I spend more time with them because I still live in Montana and they're still on either coast, so I don't
Yeah,
see them as much as I'd like to. But now I'm far more open and honest with them. I don't hold back because, for years I didn't dare, tell them what was really going
yeah,
on in our home. Now I'm an open book. And we have, let's say, greater depth
yeah.
and transparency in our relationships, which again, that's a good thing.
Great thing. And did that kind of like help you after everything that occurred, like
Yeah.
rebuilding those relationships and bonds? And did you like kind of like lean on some of your friends kind of like to get by everything?
Oh boy, did I lean. I leaned a lot on my friends. I remember during the really rough parts. So she left me in 2017, and I was a wreck. I mean, I'm talking, I'm a
I believe
wreck.
it, man.
It was bad. I could hardly sleep for almost a year. So I have one of my brothers lived in North Carolina on the East Coast. So the mornings are always the toughest for me. I don't know why. Just they really were. I'd wake up in the morning and the world was crashing down on me. And so he was 2 hours ahead of me. So I would call him at like 7 a.m., which is 9 a.m. his time.
Yeah.
And he would talk me through the morning for like an hour. Then he had to go to work. And then I have a brother in California. So at about 8 a.m., which is 7 a.m. his time, I'd call him. And like I did this every morning for months where just to get me through the day. I'd call the one brother who was 2 hours ahead of time, like you are right now in New York.
Yeah.
And then I'd call the other brother who was in California an hour behind. And that's just one example. I did a lot of that with a number of people, which really shows you the beauty of friends and family, right? Like that's what we're
Yeah,
here
man.
for.
And that's the most beautiful part about it. Like, just like your example earlier, you went through a crucible, right? You came out, you came out pretty scathed, but you were good. You had your faith intact or restored,
Yep.
and you leaned on those that always had love for you in the beginning.
Right. That's a good
And
way to put it. Yep.
like when people go through certain things, certain events in life, some of those relationships do get broken, some bridges are burned. In your case, most of those bridges, or all of them, were still there intact, and you were able to cross them and get the help and get the support that you needed during those times. And that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate that I
Very,
had
very
so
fortunate.
many wonderful friends in my community and also, my family around the country. I mean, there was a time where Like, so, okay, I'm the youngest of five. I'm the only one that's divorced. Like, my family really never had anything like this. So when it happened, they put the word out, and there were people all over the country, like literally probably over
Yeah.
100 people around the country praying for me and my family to get me through that moment. And I look back and I look back and think about how all of those people, kind of dropped everything and
Yeah.
showed concern and did what they could to help. It's amazing and humbling, really.
Yeah, but that's also a reflection of yourself too, Peter. That shows that you didn't only affect these people's lives, you loved them and they loved you
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the most beautiful thing about life. You know what I mean? You grow, you kind of set your way, not get set in your ways, but you kind of set these seeds and these plans around yourself where eventually, if you were to, kind of take a knee or fall a little bit, they're there to, give you that support. And that's a great lesson for everybody out there, because right now we're living in an age where people are like, they're quick to cut people off
Yeah. Yeah.
or be estranged with family members. And and I can honestly say, there's two family members of mine that I love dearly, but I don't communicate with them because of personal matters or whatever.
Yeah.
But I still love them to death. But at the end of the day, if they were ever to need something from me or need support, I'll be there for them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And the lesson, where I'm really trying to get at is that it's amazing that people still have that connection, even though in 2026 people are so used to cutting people off quickly and being like, it's your drama, I don't want to deal with it, or
Right.
if it isn't about me or benefits me, I'm not going to help you.
Right.
Yeah.
And that really, I think, showed the true character of my family and friends. That
Yeah.
this, if this wasn't a family emergency, I remember one brother saying, "If this is not a family emergency, I don't know what is." Right. And I remember too something to point out. I thought it was obvious what I was going through, but I didn't tell anybody. So I sell real estate to pay the bills. In addition to being an
Mm.
author, I'm a real estate broker, and so I would show up to work, and nobody saw me crying, but I'd show up with red puffy eyes. I couldn't eat. I looked horrible. And about 9 months after my wife left me and took the three youngest kids, I finally, as I'm starting to recover, finally starting to see the truth of what was going on, I told everybody at my office what was happening. Ariel, nobody had any idea.
Yeah.
No one had any clue. And I remember being stunned by that. That was one of the big lessons. So the rude grocery clerk, or the guy that bumps into you on the sidewalk, or the guy that cuts you off on the highway, you have no idea what they're going through.
True.
Everybody that you meet is either going through something hard, already has, or will. So instead of reacting in kind and being angry back, be kind, because you never know what that other person is going through.
No, that's 100% true, because people that are going through the most have the best mask on. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
trying they're trying to make sure that nobody outside of themselves know that their world is collapsing. And
right,
I could truly understand that, everybody kind of does that. They don't want other people to kind of know what they're going through, because they don't want to feel shame or pity, or be looked at as like, oh, this is going on with this guy, maybe we should kind of steer clear of him and all this other stuff. Like, you don't want to be not excommunicated but exiled from your
right,
circles, or feel like a burden to people because of your own personal matters.
right,
And it's crazy how that mentality kind of like reverberates through society, but when you kind of like open up about it, you kind of see the truth about everyone, and they kind of come together and want to help instead of like alienate you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Good point.
Yeah, but it's amazing how it's amazing how we think one thing and our perception is one thing, but the truth of the matter is, when we open up and be truthful about things, people usually are quick to gather and form assistance when you're a good person to them.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And that's one of the lessons of my story. And yeah, so and there's a story in the Bible from Luke 8 where there's a guy that was demon possessed, and Christ heals him.
Yeah.
And the man begs Christ. He says, "Can I follow you?" And Christ says, "No, what I want you to do is I want you to go home, and I want you to tell your friends and family what the Lord has done for you." Well, could you imagine the story would have been pretty bizarre, right? So this guy was demon possessed in the Bible. He's living in
Mhm.
caves. He's cutting himself. People try and control him, and they can't. So then Christ heals him. I mean, that guy's story is pretty bizarre,
Yeah.
but he told it because that's what Christ had done for him.
Okay.
That's just like my story. This is what the Lord has done for me,
Mhm.
and if He can do this for me, He can work miracles for you too.
100%. And before I let you go, P, do you have any final thoughts, words of wisdom, advice for the roomies before we close out?
Yeah, I would say that the one really key lesson from my story is how important fellowship, community is. Cult leaders will isolate you, and that's how you become vulnerable. So again, you don't have to go to Bible study, but if it's Friday night beers, if it's bowling, if it's poker league, whatever it is, stay in fellowship, show up, be in person, have strong fellowships. And when you see someone else who's getting cut off, reach out, be a good friend, be a good family member, and stay in connection, stay in community. Because when you become isolated, which is very easy for us to do in our world of Zoom and internet
Yeah.
and email and text messages, that's when we become very vulnerable to, if it's not a cult leader, it's somebody who's, let's say, got ill intent. That's
Yeah.
probably the biggest advice I can give is stay in contact, have a tight knit group of people, and don't become isolated.
I got you. And roomies, remember, stay in touch with your family, friends. Always keep that hand out. And when you fall, don't be afraid to reach out to have them help you. And with that, lead with love and peace out.